So I've been guilty of this, and I've felt in the past this pressure to keep up. In certain cases, it's almost like I have FOMO. Like I have this fear of missing out, not reading the national or the New York Times best-selling book of 2022. And I believe with AI, the scale of self-help I'm seeing now is going to become exponential. It already is, right? We're already seeing it. Nikos, how are you?
Good. Doing well, my friend.
Where are you this week?
I am actually at home in the Bay Area visiting some family. So yeah, a little bit of a switch up for the setup. So thank you for being flexible.
Are you in Brisbane?
I am in Brisbane, California.
Okay, Brisbane, for the listeners, is the first town right after you leave the city of San Francisco. Population, last time I checked, I used to live in Brisbane, was 3,472. What's it these days?
Probably 3,475.
Okay, all right. So not much has changed then.
I don't think so.
I've been hearing San Francisco is turning into Gotham City. They need a Batman.
That is correct. They need a savior of sorts. It's interesting when you hear about what's been going on with the city. It's also sad to see because I grew up in downtown San Francisco. So I used to walk around those streets as an 8-year-old, 10-year-old, and it was perfectly safe. And it was an idyllic time in my life. I lived, striking distance away from Chinatown, went to grammar school there at a little private school called NDV. And I used to walk to and from school. Sometimes my mom would give me a ride and it's totally fine. And today it's changed so much. And, being a native San Franciscan, kind of breaks my heart to know what's happened to the city and how it's been unraveling.
But is it as bad as the reports say it is? Because, I can't tell. Usually, the news is sensationalized. What is the reality on the ground?
I think if you get the pulse on the people that are in the Bay Area, when I walk the streets, I think the last time I was actually downtown San Francisco was around Christmas time. And I didn't feel or experience a significant difference. I think even around Thanksgiving, I used to walk around my old neighborhood, which was around 6th and Clara, which is not the best part of town, right at the hub of Tenderloin almost. And I did a walk from 4th Street down to 10th on Market. So I didn't notice that much of a difference, but it's the people that actually live here that either say they don't go downtown anymore, the influx of businesses that are actually leaving the downtown area. So you hear more and more about that. But I could say there is somewhat of a disparity between what I've personally experienced. And I don't know if I'm just kind of walking around with my head above the clouds and not paying attention, but it's pretty much the same. The homeless problem has always been bad in San Francisco, but now, people are describing it as a cesspool, but maybe I was desensitized to it even back then. But yeah, it's unfortunate when you start. Back then, I didn't feel like, and this was, I moved out of San Francisco and into Chicago 2013, 2012. When I say back then, when I lived downtown San Francisco, it was around 2005 to 2010. And even then, yeah, there were a lot of homeless people. It was really bad. But from what I gather today, people they just don't feel safe anymore. Mm-hmm. The homeless people with the mental problems and the drug issues, that has always been there, but it's exacerbated by the volume of people that have garnered downtown and have camped out in tents, and law enforcement just not really doing anything about it, just with the changes in the political scene here in California in general. So that's been problematic to the degree in which the news tends to sensationalize the number of businesses that are shutting down. But it is unfortunate. Even the Union Square area, which is our version of Times Square, all of the luxury shops are shutting down. Nordstrom, all of like the big shops just don't want businesses in there anymore.
I heard
that's
that.
Really sad.
It's funny you mentioned that because a friend of mine was in the Union Square area during the summer. and last summer, and they were in one of the luxury shops. And as they were walking out, they did some shopping. As they were walking out, the store attendant basically gave them another bag to put their shopping bag. I think they were at Gucci or Louis Vuitton, one of those brands, and they were given a brown bag to put the Louis Vuitton bag in because they wanted to conceal that they were holding bags from a luxury store.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And to your earlier point, I do now recall, as I'm kind of pondering it a little bit more, the sense of aggression is definitely dialed up with respect to the people that are living on the street. And it used to be, just like any other city where there are homeless people asking for spare change and things like that, and they'd be polite. And they'd even have, some story to tell and something like that, where it felt almost jovial. And so, yeah, every now and then I would give in some money if I happen to carry cash. I stopped carrying cash a long time ago, unfortunately. But today, the aggression, I definitely recall a few instances in which, a few people had and you see the same people around too sometimes. And I remember this one guy that would be a little bit more aggressive when either like I wouldn't give him change or give somebody attitude, and I'm like I'm noticing some consistent behaviors here. So yeah, there's definitely that that's a little bit more heated these days than it used to be.
Okay, with that as a backdrop, I mean, today we're talking about self-development in the age of AI, and it seems like in San Francisco, the tech companies are leaving. So AI is leaving the city, and development is going backwards. So let's talk about self-development and how it's been ubiquitous. It's everywhere, right? So
yeah,
let's put some context around self-help, right? What is self-help? So self-help encompasses a wide range of products and services, right? So from books, courses, seminars, coaching being a big one, therapy, and much more. Now, the self-help industry is worth billions of dollars annually, just in the United States alone, right? The self-help industry is estimated to be, the last time I checked, about 12 billion per year in North America. And that market is continuing to grow. Now, self-help can be helpful in many ways, as it encourages people, individuals, to take responsibility for their own lives, right? And it helps them develop skills and strategies for personal growth and improvement. However, there are some potential problems with self-help as well, right? And here's what I've observed. So I used to do this myself, and I noticed that I'm not alone in this. So we're going from book to book, right? From one book to the next, from one seminar to the next seminar, from one podcast to the next. We're constantly learning, which is great, right? But how much of this stuff are we actually implementing consistently in our lives, in our business, in our health? And I noticed that, for me at least, at one point, it became this chase of learning for learning's sake. And we end up pursuing knowledge or education purely for the sake of personal growth. And it's almost that now it's a badge of honor. It's become this status symbol, right? I've read X number of books, or I listen to, 10 podcasts a week, rather than, the practical reasons such as career advancement or financial gain, right? Like really getting down to, what's the objective of self-help? What is the objective of this book? How is it going to enrich my career or my health? So I've been guilty of this. And I've felt in the past this pressure to keep up, right? And in certain cases, it's almost like I have FOMO. Like I have this fear of missing out, not reading the national, or the New York Times best-selling book of 2022, right? And I believe with AI, the scale of self-help I'm seeing now is going to become exponential. It already is, right? We're already seeing it. So that's That's what we want to talk about today. However, it's also important to note that AI itself is also becoming a tool for self-help, right? Professionalized AI-powered learning platforms, chatbots, virtual coaches is a big thing. As a matter of fact, I wanted to share with you something that I discovered recently around chatbots and virtualized coaching. So, Nix, have you heard of Weebot?
I have. It's actually kind of like your personal therapist on your phone, right?
It's incredible. So I downloaded it and started having a chat with a personalized coach, and so it asked me, "How are you doing?" I said, "I'm okay," and then then it asked me again, "I've got a couple of questions I'd like to ask you just so I can get a better picture of how you've been doing lately." I said, "Okay." So then it asks me, "I wonder, over the last 2 weeks, how often have you been bothered by little interest or pleasure in doing things?" I said, "Nearly every day." "Over the last 2 weeks, how often have you been bothered by feeling down, depressed, or hopeless?" I said, "Nearly every day." And then it said, "Thank you, Dhiren. If you're feeling overwhelmed, maybe you'd like to try a tool. Stress or anxiety, feeling overwhelmed, sadness or depression." So I picked sadness or depression. It says, "Of course, I've got valuable tools in my circuit that will help challenge your thinking. It'll take about 10 minutes." And then it starts going through some CBT techniques along with some cognitive distortion techniques. I mean, this thing is incredible. So in terms of personalized coaching, this very well may be the future.
It very well may be, or the present, really, right? So what's interesting for folks that are obviously kind of tuned into this space right now. So those conversational chatbots are trained on a ton of data, right? So whether it's leveraging, legacy machine learning pipelines or these new things called large language models or transformers, it's basically getting really, really good at identifying these hidden states and patterns to the degree in which it's starting to resemble real human-like types of behaviors, because you have a sequence in which you're feeding this transformer with a ton of data, and then you're having a human actually check for those answers. So this company it seems to be, dialed in on the human feedback portion of it, and also training it such that it feels like it's having a good conversation with you. What's interesting is that when it starts to incorporate your personal preferences and your data, right now it may seem like it's going to be a little bit generic because it's just a question answer search algorithm, right? That's just going to bring up one key output based on a set amount of personal characteristics or traits, depending on what you're feeding into the system. So what it feeds back to you seems uncannily very helpful, just even with a few of those prompts. It's going to get fairly mind-blowing very, very quickly. The sooner it starts to incorporate more of your personal preferences, the more that it trains that kind of model. So yeah, it's going to be very mind-blowing in terms of that kind of personal interaction. So to your earlier point about what does this look like, is an AI going to be better than a therapist that you pay $200 an hour for if it can fine-tune every single one of those aspects and identify those hidden characteristics that no person could ever possibly know, just because they don't have a log of all of your data? So think about the data security, exactly. and that, which is another issue here, is right. Okay, how much of my data am I willing to give up to this AI such that they could help me? So I think people in the age of AI really just need to be fairly aware of how they're managing their data, what data they're providing to a certain system, and where that data is essentially being stored, if not on my own. If I don't have access to my own data, then how is this, ultimately problematic? So there's kind of that big brother aspect to it, but let's unpack that later. Right now, the automation of self-help based on tons of new data, being able to have personalized preferences for treatment, whatever problem you're aiming to solve for, and ultimately having kind of that 360 view of you as a person, self-development in the age of AI is going to be very much accelerated, but also, to your other point about, consuming our way to death and not really implementing anything about that whatsoever, I feel like AI will also help us distill a lot of these, because there's just so much information that it's just all noise. So what these conversational assistants now, based on these large language models, they'll help you distill exactly what you need based on what you're asking it, which is why prompt engineering is all the buzz right now.
Yeah, but I think about my journey in AI and self-help. So I have 3 coaches and 2 mentors. I have a fitness coach, and I know that there are AI-powered fitness coaching platforms out there that can do everything that my human coach can do, right? But to me, my coach provides me much more than a fitness program, right? I get a lot of inspiration from my coach. He's not an armchair coach. So, I see firsthand how he's able to manage his business, his pets, his relationships, while still being able to maintain a high level of commitment to the sport, to fitness, to his clients. So I get to banter with him, right? Every 2 days, I'll pick up the phone or he'll call me and we'll have a good banter. Or when we're on the track, I find that super valuable. I mean, that helps me become a better athlete. It lets me become a better entrepreneur, father, in all the roles that I play. So I won't be able to do that with an AI-powered platform, right? Especially then when you think about a business coach or relationship coach, again, the relationship with the coach provides more than just a very specific, customized, tailored approach. There's that humanity element that's lost. And that's what I worry about. And that's one of the main drivers as to why I haven't been drawn to, some of these platforms. I mean, I'm experimenting with them. I definitely want to understand what's going on and where things are moving. But am I a user at the moment? I'm not a user at the moment. Do I foresee myself using it? Not in the short to medium term. That relationship is just so much more valuable for me.
I think you and I, there are a couple different ways to look at this. And one call out is the underpinning of digital technologies and platforms themselves and what it's done to society and how it's rewired the brains of every millennial and Gen Zer that was born post the web. You and I are Gen Xers, and so we lived before the internet. We were still using fax machines and, God forbid, word processors and things that tended to be a little bit more analog. And so we can kind of take a step back, even though we're technologists and we have fully adapted. And now it's a big part of our game is the technology aspect. But think about the people that grew up with a mobile phone or started using a mobile phone when they were like 10 years old. Think about how that's rewired their brain. I know millennials that prefer text conversations much more to one-on-ones, right? So for some reason, technology has done something to us. What you're describing with your coach is that real one-to-one nuanced human interaction where you feel the vibrancy, the frequency of another human in the room with you. That's vibrating at a much different frequency than just a digital connection over some web protocol, right? That's very much different. Yeah. So I don't know if corresponding generations prefer that is the answer. And now, while AR and VR technologies are also starting to emerge and become the norm, I wonder if that becomes kind of like a new semblance of our experience. And again, this opens up implications for what AI, the intersection of AI, AR, and VR ultimately becomes. As more of these experiences become more tangible, the way that the brain kind of starts to interpret them, how do we experience things? If you have kind of like a very explicit one-to-one match between, well, this is my experience now, it's fairly close in the VR world, which, give it 10, 20 years, could it be very, very close to that same kind of human interaction? That'll be a game changer too. So just want to make people aware of kind of like the layers that are going on there, especially with these digital platforms that are taking over our lives.
Mm. And then when you think about it from a cost perspective, right? I mean, the marginal cost of photos, music, I mean, everything that we used to pay $15, $20 for now is $1, right? Some of them is actually it's free. The marginal cost is zero, right? So marginal cost of coaching and self-help, the services in the self-help space, could be impacted by trends that we're seeing, right? Increasing availability of technology, enabling of remote services. It's going to, over time, drive down the cost. It's going to reduce the cost of delivery. And what does that do to competition, right? With lower prices, right? Is it going to lead to, increased competition will lead to potentially lower prices, but that's one driver. The other driver is the fact that it's so ubiquitous, and now you've got apps like WeBot that ask you very specific, tailored questions. What's that going to do to the overall cost? The growing interest, however, the growing interest in self-improvement and personal development may drive up demand, right? It may drive it up. Especially in the short term, if you think about the level of overwhelm that people are feeling right now, right? In terms of job displacement and all sorts of issues that AI is starting to create. Additionally, coaching providers may face pressure to demonstrate effectiveness, right? Potentially reducing their prices because of increased competition, not just from the fact that it's a growing industry, self-help, but also from the fact that you've got these platforms that are now displacing the traditional service providers in this industry.
Yeah, what I find super interesting about what you're saying, and I'd love to get into your perspective on how technology as a whole is changing your coaching business, right? Because you have an actual coaching business, and how you motivate others and how you inspire others. That's akin to your brand, your unique approach, who you are. So I'd love to know how you're augmenting your own business. But from a displacement standpoint, we're seeing it all around, not just in the coaching business, but the jobs that we thought were secure, that required a lot more creativity, seem to be the ones that are getting displaced first. So that is super interesting for marketers, copywriters, and now creative directors that are shooting commercials through which you could potentially, in less than 2 to 3 years, prompt an entire movie or prompt a series, and it would give you Pixar quality dimensions and outputs.
I've seen
so that is insane, and I've been following that very closely, using all the tools like Stable Diffusion and Midjourney. And so how do you get an edge on that as a coach? So the first thing you need to do is essentially use the tools, brush up on these tools. I think a lot of people, especially outside of the tech space, don't even know this is going on, right? So ChatGPT is all the buzz in the tech space, but outside of that, a lot of people have never heard of this thing, don't know, don't care. But as adoption grows, it's going to be very much like Google in 2000, right? Where the explosion takes place. Now everybody is just searching on hand. That's going to augment absolutely everything. So yeah, I feel like fundamentally the shift is taking place in more of these creative endeavors, but also goes back to your initial point about, what the value of real human interaction is and where that nuance starts to take place. There's definitely the law of accelerating change happening there. But would love to get your opinion on how you're augmenting yourself as a self-hacking coach to yourself, your own personal practice, and also to your clients.
I mean, for now, no one really knows how this is all going to play out. That's the reality, right? But I think for all of us, not just for people in the self-help industry, coaches, therapists, fitness coaches, leadership coaches, anyone in the self-help industry should really be thinking about, or should have their pulse on, the technology. We all need to understand how we can leverage technology to augment ourselves, right? Because I don't think it's going to be AI that's going to be replacing self-help. I think what's going to happen is, in order for you to continue, in order for someone in the self-help industry to continue to stay relevant, augmenting themselves and leveraging AI is going to be absolutely essential, right? And then it also depends on who you're working with, right? If you're working with like the Gen Zs and the millennials who are far more comfortable and they're digitally native, then I think time is definitely not in your favor. You have to accelerate and understand how you can leverage these technologies at a much quicker pace. For someone like me who's working with, profile of people between the age of 35 and 55, that human connection is still essential, right? It's the relationship that carries the value that we're able to maximize during the journey. Yes, the tools are key. Asking the right questions, absolutely, right? But it's the relationship and the historical perspective of that relationship that's been through a journey that's valuable. So this past week, I delivered a couple of workshops, and being in the room, right, in person, physically with people there, there's just no substitute to it, right? The energy that you feel and you're able to transmit, that exchange, that in itself is transformational for people who are looking for transformation, for people who are looking to overcome, break through barriers, embrace change. So as far as how I'm using it in my practice right now, I'm doing a lot of experimentation. I'm using AI note takers, trying to build the data and try to understand how I can gain insights from feedback that I'm getting from people that I'm working with. That's definitely one way, and just staying ahead of the curve.
Yeah, that's awesome. I find it super interesting that these technologies, and you can have 1,000 apps on your phone, and you can have automated assistants and basically these tactical tools that help you keep track of things, keep track of your goals. But the true work still happens without your mobile device. Everything that we've talked about that is foundational to growth, your mindset, your perspective of the world, and whether or not you yourself are dialed into this flow experience, which we touched on our voice memo text conversation last night, is something fundamental to all of this, right? You can experience flow when you're using a lot of these technologies, but what does that unlock for you in terms of the optimal experience that I am feeling in the moment when I'm doing this task, but also unlocking the delivery mechanism of being, and performing my very best. And so those two things coming together are the ultimate form of self-development, is when you're experiencing those things. And at some point, no app can make you feel that way, because only you can be dialed into that.
Yeah. Yeah. My breakthroughs have always come from, to just build on your point, have always come from self-reflection, from meditation, from journaling, or just walking in nature, right? Or during a run, or while I'm on my bike. So will self-help in the age of AI lead us to a world where we rely too much on machines to solve our problems and forget the importance of personal growth and self-reflection? I mean, while AI is powerful, it's a powerful tool already for self-improvement. And like you said, It's growing exponentially. But we must not forget that true personal growth and transformation comes from within, right? We've had this conversation. I mean, we can't solely rely on machines to provide us with answers to all of our problems, but rather use them as a complementary tool to aid us in our journey of self-discovery. So it's about striking that balance between utilizing the benefits of AI technology and developing our own capacity of self-awareness and introspection. And I look at the next gen and the gen after that, and they're far more self-aware than I used to be. I'm actually curious to hear your thoughts. You've interacted with Gen Zs and Gen Ys.
Absolutely.
What's your observation? Do you think they're far more self-aware than we were?
I think so. It's without question, and it's without question because of the distillation, the encapsulation of all of this information into digital bits and bytes fed to them in feeds. There's obviously benefits and detriments to that, right? So the distillation of all information, you have apps like Blinkist, which I absolutely love because you have to distill lots of information, right? And then you have the whole social media influencer and YouTuber generation that it essentially it's atomizing mass media. So when you have mass media back in the day, you had only like 5 or 6 different sources for all of your news, all of your media, when really everything that we're sensing right now in terms of the distrust of mass media and what institutionalized media is providing, and also just the emergence and the explosion of atomized YouTube channels and personal brands that are more trusted sources for these individuals. Again, you're distilling a ton of this content and then laying it out for individuals. That's become the medium. And as McLuhan said, right, the medium is the actual message. And so you got to pay attention to that, not the message itself. It's how it's delivered. And so I agree that the self-awareness is a result of again, these technologies. But also the flip side of that is, like we had mentioned before, and I want to tie this back to something that you said earlier, is, consuming ourselves to death such that you're just a consumer and not a producer. What does, if you think about it, it's really interesting. Like, what does somebody who's learned all of these things tend to do with it? You've read 1,000 books on self-development. I've done it too. Tony Robbins back in the day, Awaken the Giant Within, right? All of that stuff.
All of it.
Are kind of foundational. Dale Carnegie, even like the old school ones, right? What happens is you create your own products. You catalyze those things and you alchemize that knowledge, and you have your own fingerprint and your own perspective to offer the world. And that becomes a semblance to, again, how information flow starts to happen. But again, I want to highlight the other point that if we consume ourselves to death and you're not actually doing the inner work, if you're not spending an hour a day at least with your brain in silence, because all that's doing is giving you more thoughts, right? It's like, oh, I should be doing this, I should be doing this. And you find yourself chasing all of these externalities outside without focusing inward on how you're feeling. That becomes the ultimate kind of litmus test and the ultimate compass for how you're experiencing the world and how you should be feeling. Yeah. And often this goes back to something we explored in earlier episodes, right? It's like if there's like a misalignment between what I'm chasing externally and what I'm feeling internally. That is misaligned. And right now, we'll soon have technologies that can find that alignment if you have kind of like these these nanobots in your brain that are tracking every single motion, God forbid, and every single synapse and all of the neurochemistry. If you could measure every single one of those things, then great. But at the same time, again, this happens without all of those externalities. The inner game happens with you settling into yourself and finding that inner game
flow. Yeah,
finding that flow.
Yeah. So, what are some of the predictions in the short term around self-help in the age of AI?
Definitely. So we're definitely seeing.
Do you think people will be more overwhelmed in the short term?
I think people are overwhelmed now.
Yeah.
I think if you don't have a steady meditation practice, I think it's easy to get overwhelmed with everything that you're seeing, because you're just not aware of you're not aware that your thoughts are basically controlling how you perceive things, and the mind just tends to always divide things in two, and it always tends to you always give yourself kind of like that self-talk, like either I'm this or I'm that. I am this, I am not that. I am rich, I am not rich enough. I am this, I am not, because you're always comparing yourself to, again, what you're seeing in your feed. So some of those predictions is, I feel like people will increasingly become overwhelmed. But I also feel that there are going to be solutions for this as self-development in the age of technology starts to get more augmented with business practices like yours.
So that's what happens in the short term. Yes, agreed. We're already overwhelmed, but the rate of overwhelm is growing exponentially. In the medium to long term, self-help, can we say it's going to be commoditized, which will lead to greater access? And if it leads to greater access, then we could potentially be looking at abundance. Right? If everyone has access to self-help and it's a commodity that everyone has access to, would that lead to abundance? Would that lead to greater health?
Collectively. You're saying collectively? Absolutely. Yes. Again, an underpinning, and I don't mean to go so macro on this, but you can't help but talk about the implications for humanity as a whole as a result of access, the democratization of technology for others, and the automation of a lot of these tasks that are really kind of like shifting the entire landscape as a whole, in work, in business, in life, and all of those things. And so as we grow in abundance, as we grow in awareness, because I do have a thesis that humanity as a whole is creating consciousness, is becoming more conscious as a whole. There is emergent phenomenon taking place right now, which is why more of these innovations and the intersection of these innovations across vast fields are taking place. Day after day, you're hearing more of these announcements, right? It's because of the permutations and the intersections of all of these technologies and how AI is impacting all of these industries is causing those ripple effects. There's also a downside. There's also a dark side, obviously. So all of the AI thought leaders are also sounding the alarm on halting development, especially the Jeff Hintons of the world, who are considered the one of the godfathers of AI. Elon Musk, especially Nick Bostrom, he talks about super intelligence and potentially the AI overlords starting to take over. And then, of course, Ray Kurzweil, who's still a strong proponent of the positive side, as well as Peter Diamandis and all of the folks at Singularity University that believe that, when AI, say 2050, artificial general intelligence is for sure going to happen, then it becomes smarter than us. It becomes more powerful than us, has access to all of these data ecosystems. It's going to change the game such that the change is going to accelerate so much that the lives as we know it right now are fully unrecognizable, which is what they call the singularity, right? And it's they borrowed the term from physics, in which everything collapses back into a black hole, back into that, the 0 point, right? And from there, we get kind of like this massive reboot, and nobody knows what's going to happen then. So to your point, nobody knows what's going to happen. So it feels very much like we have this duality of opportunity, and also on the dark side, it's like we also have the potential to completely annihilate ourselves if they're equating AI very similar to nuclear weapons, and that's a whole other thing. But we're getting away from the topic of self-development, but it all plays a role. Yeah,
it all plays, but it's all connected.
Plays a role. Yeah, it's all connected.
It's all connected. So, I mean, in summary, it seems like AI will do a better job when it comes to providing custom tailored solutions. That's very clear, right? I mean, that's blindingly clear. I mean, it's happening with WeBot right now, and it's only going to get better, right? However, at the core, the humanity that we share, the energy that we're exchanging, right, in all modalities of self-help is absolutely essential, right? So the way I'm thinking about it now is that the future is a hybrid model, right? Think of virtual versus in-person, right? So I believe an augmented self-help solution, a hybrid, is what we'll start seeing more of. And I think that is the solution that I hope to see in the self-help industry. It's what I hope to use myself. It's what I hope my peers, my family, my friends would use, because the human connection is what makes us human, right? That's our humanity. That's all we have, right? And so, and coaching and self-help is all about that human connection.
Absolutely. What do you think about this? And I kind of want to land here, because at the core of all of these things, regardless of whether or not you are utilizing these tools or just using a pen and paper and a journal, everything that exists outside of our skin, right, outside of our bodies, is a tool to get us somewhere, to navigate this crazy world in life. But doesn't all self-development, with AI or not, doesn't it start with intent? And if you want to grow as a person, you want to get better as a person, you're striving to figure out your place in the entire universe. It starts with your intent to do that, your intent to grow, which is why you start to seek. And if you are a seeker, that's maybe why you read all of these self-help books, and you're trying to find yourself, you're trying to find your path, you're trying to find your purpose. All of that tends to get exacerbated by what you do see, right? So the world tends to become a reflection of what you intend. And so that's my thesis right there, is that, the better your intentions, the more growth you'll have, the more development that you'll have with or without AI. How does intent play a role in self-development?
Absolutely essential. I mean, I think that's a great point. It really all starts with intent, because from your intent, you start forming thoughts, and your thoughts then lead to a release of chemicals. Those chemicals then influences the way you behave. So yeah, I mean, the power of intention, and we've spoken about Dr. Joe's work and how critical intention is in the work, because intention creates that feeling, right? It shifts the energy. It locks you into a specific frequency that is, if it's a positive intent, which I believe all humans at the core have positive intent, that locks you into a frequency, which then gets you into a state of mind. And that's really what it's all about. I mean, at the most fundamental level, what is your intention? And everything cascades from there.
In your practice, do you feel that, and I know this is specific to your core group, who are tend to be like the top 1% of high achievers already, right? The intent is pretty clear in their minds. Do you come across?
What do you think the intent is in their minds?
I mean, like the typical archetype of an entrepreneur is like they want to put a dent in the universe, and
make a mark,
big, and make a mark, make that big change. Entrepreneurship as the medium of this generation, building something that changes the world. Every entrepreneur says that, right? They want to align their ultimate purpose with what they're building. I wonder if you have entrepreneurs that are still trying to discover and find their path, right? Like fumbling around. How clear are your clients on those goals? Like, I mean, like, especially when you're doing your visioning exercises, right? Your semantic and your neuro-linguistic programming, when you're trying to do the self-talk so that hopefully the vision becomes so crystallized that it drops into the unconscious and then it materializes itself later. You have to do a lot of work to actually get there. But nobody really talks about, well, what if I don't really have a vision? Like, I mean, like, how many entrepreneurs don't have vision? Then should you not be an entrepreneur? I mean, that's a bigger question, right? What about for the folks that are still on the path to self-discovery? How can you use tools and technologies to get there? What's your opinion on that, Coach?
So, vision has become a buzzword, right? Let's talk about something a little more tangible, right?
Yeah.
What's more tangible than vision is, what do you want, right? At the heart of it, what do you want? And most people, especially entrepreneurs, the reason most people don't know what they want, I'll go a little beyond entrepreneurs right now. But the reason most people don't know what they want is because subconsciously they know that as soon as they figure out what they want, guess what happens next?
They want something else.
They're going to have to take action. Yeah, eventually that shows up too. They're going to want something else. It's this pursuit for more, right? But as soon as they figure it out, they have to take action. And then the fear starts coming in, right? The fear of failure. What if I'm not good enough, right? At the core of it is that not good enough, right? And so it's a process. Some entrepreneurs know exactly what they want, and some entrepreneurs are trying to figure it out. They're trying to figure out what they want. And then there are entrepreneurs who know what they want, but want it for the wrong reasons. Most of the time, I find goals are not achieved because we are doing it for the wrong reason. We're doing it because there are people in our environment, either we're comparing ourselves to the entrepreneur that we're competing with, or a friend that's an entrepreneur, and we're wondering, well, why haven't I achieved that level of success? And so we start calibrating to what we want, but it's not an authentic desire that's coming from within. It's externally stimulated, and anything externally stimulated is not sustainable, right? When it comes to inspiration, motivation, anything external is short-lived, right? And that's what the self-help industry has figured out, right? As long as we don't get to the root of the problem, right? People are just going to keep buying one book after the other, attending the workshops, the courses, the master classes, because they're not getting to the root of the problem. And so in order for us to truly know what we want and to have that clear vision, right? It goes back to what you were talking about earlier, is self-reflection, really understanding ourselves at a very deep level, spending that time in isolation. And then asking ourselves, well, why do we want what we want, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's driving that?
Would you equate reading all of these books, isn't that a form of action? Do you feel that we're kind of downplaying the act of pursuing knowledge? If you're not applying the action, then we're almost discounting it, which I think is almost a misconception. Almost. And I'd love your opinion on this too, is because I feel like it's whatever you attend to ultimately changes you as an individual. So there's a difference between reading a bunch of self-help books and literally there's some intent that's tied behind that, right? Like whether it's just interest or looking at something bigger than yourself, and maybe you just really like to read, versus Say you like unsavory content and really violent movies, and if you attend to that and that becomes your focus area, things will change in your subconscious, and it alters your perspective in life. So wouldn't you say that even in this pursuit, in this passive world of consumption, that's a form of action in and of itself, or are you about more of that Tony Robbins school of take massive action to create the impact, and that's really what's going to move mountains as an individual and as an entrepreneur?
No, I think as an entrepreneur, it's about 2 points I want to make. It's about playing the long game, right? It's a difficult journey, right? Entrepreneurs are a special breed of human. Not everyone can be an entrepreneur. It's really, really difficult. Entrepreneurs are living at the edge or outside the edge of their comfort zone, right? They have this burning desire to take their life, their business, their health to the next level, right? And, they're the dreamers, the problem solvers, the visionaries. So it really comes down to what is the intent of the entrepreneur, right? As you said earlier. And I love that point, because that's what it comes down to. So when we're going through this consumption of knowledge, which is great, I think, we should all continue to learn and grow. But what's the purpose, right? If we're continuing to just learn and grow for learning and growing's sake, and we're not implementing or taking action, then a lot of the knowledge that we're taking in, it's like I can read every book on swimming in the world that has ever been written. Does that mean I'll know how to swim? No, I still need to practice it in order for me to be able to embody and retain and really maximize the value of that knowledge, the value of the idea, of the concept. Did I answer your question, Mr. Nikos?
You did. You sure did, sir. And it's you could be a thinker or you can be a doer. You need a little bit of both.
You need a little bit of both.
Yeah. To your earlier point about comfort zones, I want to tie this back to AI as well, because technology has made society lazy at some level. And I think you could tie that back to passive consumption and doom scrolling on your phone, to the point of being so overwhelmed that you have no idea what to do. Or there's also this snapshot of the world, like that Pixar movie WALL-E, where everything is just automated for you, and we just become all of these fat slobs drinking big gulps all day long and consuming these 1,000 calorie drinks. So AI has kind of the danger, the potential to just make us all a whole lot lazier. On the flip side of that, you talked about entrepreneurship, which requires something we touched on in an earlier episode, which is the grit, the resilience, the suffering. Let's call it suffering almost. There's definitely table stakes when it comes to achieving something great. But in the age of AI, that's different now, right? Let's talk about the artists. Let's talk about the artists that have been paid and make a living on creating beautiful art. Even the digital artists that suffer for days creating kind of this perfect photoshopped image illustration, album art, whatever that is. That was their craft, and they loved it. 3D animation generators. But now in the age of AI, all that's going away because of Stable Diffusion and Midjourney, where you can just write a prompt and there's your script. I want a romantic comedy with Ben Affleck, but in the middle of the movie, change him to Matt Damon. I want him with a cowboy accent and wearing clothes from Paris, circa 1930. Make this a dark Gotham City, like you mentioned, in San Francisco, but then with Lord of the Rings twist. And so if you've played with these tools, which I have, I've spent about, I don't want to say, it's embarrassing how much time I've spent on it in these rabbit holes, because it has unlocked a part of my creativity, but the pain goes away, right? You're removing all of these friction points. Like, what do the astute artists say? And my friend, AI artist, Su Gwen Chung, and we're not talking AI artist in terms of like, oh, I'm writing a prompt and I'm developing stuff. She codes her own robots and collaborates with them in kind of this performance art dance. And she's an epic artist, like still one of the best, and always been a huge fan. And now you could be a nobody. And if you're a good prompt engineer and you know your camera lenses and you know the difference between 3:2 ratio versus 16:9 versus a 4K versus what the Sony A27S camera lens does in Midjourney, that takes all of the friction away. And you have not commoditized the process of the artistic craft. You have commoditized the outcome of that craft. And there's a very big difference. And that makes sense for somebody that just wants to flip stuff on Etsy all day long. But what happens to the artists that actually that are paying their dues in suffering? What do you think about paying in suffering and what that equates to when outcomes are essentially commoditized in the age of AI?
Yeah, I mean, look, the reality is I've been thinking a lot about this, not as deeply as you from an art, cinema, from that world, right? From the creative space. I think it's important to note that art is deeply, deeply personal, right? It's emotional. There's a lot of emotion when you look at an art piece or you go to a gallery, right? And many people, or at least I'll speak for myself, will still prefer art created by humans over art generated by machines. Not to say that I wouldn't buy art that's generated by machines. I have some, and I think they're really cool. But I do make the distinction between art generated by machines and art generated by humans, because to me, that human connection, as we spoke about earlier, is essential, right? To me, embracing humanity is a part of what makes me human, right? So additionally, while AI can assist in that whole creative process, it's going to be interesting to see what happens in Hollywood. I think they're going to adapt. I do believe that the industry is going to be a lot tougher to break into, especially with the advancement of technology. But it's not going to replicate the unique experience and perspective that individual human artists bring to the table. But time will tell. The reality is no one knows. And that's the beauty, right? We're going into the unknown. And going back to your point earlier about resilience, this is when we need to be not just resilient, but highly, highly adaptable. As Darwin said, it's about the survival of the fittest, but in the future, and not even the future, I think in the present, now, it's the most adaptable, right, that will overcome and navigate the complexities of the advancement of technology and artificial intelligence. So adaptability is the attribute. It's the skill that we all have to develop with intent, with conscious intent. Maybe that's something we need to talk about in future episodes. How to be more adaptable.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, I think I got that quote that you were saying. I know what you're talking about. It's not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent that survives. It is the one that is most adaptable to change.
That's the one.
You nailed it. And you nailed it with that. And that is the essence of what we've been talking about here, folks, is the augmentation of yourself is true self-development, whether that's an app or just doing the work yourself. You can use technologies all day long, but it really comes down to intent, your daily practice, your discipline, the inner work that you have, and just having some really good, solid goals.
Yeah. And the implementation.
Yeah.
All right. That was a good summary of today's episode. Nikos, I will see you next week. And for all the listeners, Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Awesome. Thanks, Dhiren. See you soon, my friend.
Thank you for tuning in to Emergence Now, where we explore the emerging trends, technologies, and ideas that are shaping our world today for you to discover yourself. We hope you have enjoyed this episode and gained valuable insights that you can apply in your own life. If you want to stay up to date with our latest episodes, be sure to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform. And don't forget to follow us on social media, where we share additional content, engage with our community, and keep the conversation going. Thank you for listening to Emergence Now, and we hope you will join us for the next episode.